With the main showrunner of Dexter confirming that the New York Ripper is not Jonah Mitchell, one popular theory about the killer's identity bites the dust. But there are still plenty of other opinions floating around out there, keeping Dexter fans up at night. Today, we are breaking down every theory about the New York Ripper's true identity, starting with one that is definitely entertaining despite being hard to believe: Cody Bennett. Now, this may be one of the least likely theories so far, but there has been a bit of buzz surrounding the idea that Cody Bennett, Rita's son, is the New York Ripper. Just hear me out. When Cody was a child, he showed no signs of being mentally disturbed, just incredibly annoying. The darkness that plagues Dexter and Harrison was not inside him at all. Even during tough times, he didn't act out much, if at all, and seemed to just be a happy-go-lucky, really talkative kid. But after Dexter entered his life, everything started to fall apart, slowly but surely. Of course, he had no idea that all of his misfortunes were Dexter's fault, so he always liked Dexter, and they seemed to be very close, even before Rita married him. But what if he wasn't doing so well after all? What if he made it look like he was resilient when in fact he was falling apart on the inside? His biological father, Paul Bennett, was a horrible father, husband, and just person in general. But Cody didn't seem to notice. He loved his dad, even as his mother snapped at Paul more and more and eventually distanced herself from him. He was too young to remember the violence Paul enacted against his mother before he went to jail the first time, so it would make sense that he didn't share his sister Aster's caution or his mother's hatred for the man. He was always excited to see his dad, in or out of prison, and never wanted to stop hanging out with him. But Dexter made sure they'd never hang out again. After a particularly tense evening and a few cross words, Dexter knocked Paul over the head with a frying pan, set him up in a hotel to look like he'd relapsed on heroin, and had him rearrested. And with the 3-strike rule in Florida, this time, Paul wouldn't be getting out. While he was in prison, Paul instigated a fight with another prisoner and ended up being bludgeoned to death during the altercation. That was undoubtedly a tough blow for Cody. He was still pretty young at the time, so having his father taken away from him and then killed would have been pretty traumatic for a kid his age. But maybe Cody would have been okay after that if his mother wasn't also murdered, this time by the Trinity Killer, just a few years later. Of course, Rita was yet another indirect victim of Dexter's. He made all the wrong moves in season 4, and that led to Trinity setting his sights on his family. Cody, again, had no idea that it was Dexter's fault that his mother was killed, but that doesn't really matter. No matter who did it, his mother was still gone forever, just like his dad. He was still so young, his mind just starting to really develop in meaningful ways, so this had to be one of the most difficult things he had to process so far in his life. But maybe he still stood a chance at being okay. I mean, luckily for him, he still had his younger brother Harrison, his big sister Aster, and his stepfather Dexter. Oh, wait. Aster was not taking everything as well. She hated Dexter for not protecting their mother and demanded they go live with their grandparents in Orlando. Dexter, despite being their rightful guardian, didn't even fight for them. He just let them go to Orlando with Paul's parents and then hardly ever saw them after that. Cody was essentially orphaned at that point. And as far as his relationship with his siblings was concerned, Aster started going down a dark path, skipping school, sneaking out of the house, drinking and using drugs all before the age of 12. She was traumatized, and it showed. The sister he had grown to know and love was pretty much gone. We know that Harrison stayed with Dexter in Miami when the other kids moved, so Cody's entire family had been ripped from him, some in very violent ways. Even if he didn't know that his mother was killed by a prolific serial killer when it happened, he would definitely find out eventually, just like Harrison did. He could also figure out Paul's manner of death, and all these factors combined could add up to one sick puppy. Cody Bennett's life was horrible, and Dexter never even cared to check back in on him. Are Paul's parents even still alive to love him? Does Cody know that his Aunt Deb was also killed by a serial killer? Besides his emotionally deteriorated sister, does he have anyone in the world he could turn to or count on? Without an anchor, his darkness could have overtaken him and led him far from home, somewhere as far as New York City. Pretty much anyone can blend in a place that large and diverse. The main issue with this theory is that the Ripper's methods seem a bit extreme for someone who wasn't born crazy, and where Cody would have gotten the training to avoid getting caught is hard to predict. But depending on when Prater started collaborating with the Ripper, he could have provided protection for whoever it was, keeping even an amateur from being caught by police. many of whom are already on Prater's payroll, by the way, all so he could continue to watch the Ripper's kill spree unfold. He's fascinated with killers, and anyone as gruesome as the Ripper was bound to catch his eye in no time. He did a lot for the killers he collected, even going so far as to pay the Gemini killer doubly just for more pictures of the victims. Prater is no stranger to incentivizing serial killing when he's impressed by someone's work. If Cody's kills made a large impression on Prater, his continued freedom could be explained by that. It's a long shot, but not impossible. And there are still other explanations for how Cody could have learned to get away with killing. The only remaining problem with this theory, then, is that Cody may be a bit young to be the Ripper. There are already 22 known victims attributed to the killer, and by the time Resurrection begins in 2022, the Ripper had been dormant for 5 years. That would mean that Cody would have had to start killing at a pretty young age, racked up almost 24 kills in just a couple of years, and then stopped killing by 2018? That seems pretty unlikely, but it hasn't stopped people from theorizing that Dexter's long abandoned, deeply traumatized stepson could be the killer. And it would be very gripping if true. Harrison and Dexter were living almost parallel lives, both having seen their mothers killed in front of them and struggling with dark urges that made it difficult for them to fit in most of the time. Harrison hated Dexter for abandoning him. Cody might too. Watching Dexter learn that, like so many other deaths, this series of murders was also kind of his fault would be fascinating. He has spent all of this time trying to keep Harrison on the right path, only to discover that the son he actually left in the dust was much, much darker and much more dangerous. How would he even process it all? Would he have to help Cody? Would he have to kill him? It would make for great television, even though it would be pretty convoluted and coincidental, so it's easy to see why some fans are holding on to this outlandish theory. It's an interesting one for sure, but luckily there are other theories that are still very compelling and a bit more realistic. Blessing Kamara came out of nowhere and quickly became a lifeline for Dexter after he moved to New York. Dexter's lack of familiarity with the city resulted in his car being towed not long after he landed in the city. Enter Blessing, the friendly family man and your car driver who came to bring Dexter to the tow yard to retrieve his car. The role doesn't seem important enough to have any staying power in Dexter's life, but Blessing made it a point to bond with Dexter right there in the car. He had a very welcoming personality and even invited Dexter to a party at his house, despite the two of them being virtual strangers. From there, he offered Dexter a decent apartment to rent, taught him how to be a great rideshare driver, which allowed Dexter to get to Red. He took Dexter into his home with open arms to dine with his family and feel like he belonged. No one would suspect a guy as kind and genuine as Blessing to be a killer, right? Well, that may have started off the case, but some cracks began to show in Blessing's facade. For one, although he was incredibly supportive of his daughter, there are a lot of moments where he's very controlling of her. When he first introduces her to Dexter, he calls her strong-headed, which she explains just means she doesn't do every little thing her father tells her to do. And he does have a lot of opinions about her and how she lives her life, despite her being 27 years old. Lots of killers are overbearing and controlling, especially of their families. Blessing doesn't want Joy to move far away from him or even out of their house. He doesn't want her fiancé Sam to go to the college of his dreams and insults his ambitions. Most importantly, he wanted to shape the way she thought of him by hiding his past from her. But in his defense, it is a past that most people might want to keep under wraps. After Blessing's mother Prudence passed away, his perfectly cheery exterior fell away. At her services, when Joy's fiancé came back with too many bags of ice, Blessing snapped. Sam was only trying to be helpful, and the matter seemed pretty insignificant, but Blessing yelled at him, said he couldn't trust anyone to do anything right, and demanded Sam fix the problem and rudely dismissed Dexter's offer to help handle it. And even though he was making quite a scene, no one, not his wife or any of his close friends who were all just feet away, seemed that surprised. They just stood there with knowing looks on their faces, almost as if they were used to Blessing flipping out like that. Well, they may have been able to anticipate that from him, but it was a side of Blessing that the fans didn't really see coming, and it made us all wonder what else was hiding beneath the surface there. But we didn't have to wonder for long, because soon he was in Dexter's basement apartment apologizing for the outburst and explaining the dark reason that his mother meant so much to him. As it turns out, Blessing was already a killer. When he was a child, he was abducted from his home in Sierra Leone and turned into a child child soldier. He said he was beaten, forced to do drugs, and do unspeakable things after he was kidnapped and used in the war. Child soldiers are often made to participate in raids, torture enemy combatants, and even innocent civilians. They can face sex trafficking and other forms of exploitation themselves, and are often indoctrinated into extreme ways of thinking. When Blessing says he was made to do horrible things, odds are we don't even know the half of it. Perhaps most shocking of all is the revelation that he killed a person. That isn't surprising to hear from a former child soldier, but it is hard to imagine someone like Blessing committing murder, even against his will. And was it really only one person? Most child soldiers are forced to participate in large-scale massacres and have body counts much higher than one. Was Blessing only owning up to one kill to see how Dexter would react and continue to control how people perceived him? It's definitely possible. With such a horrific childhood, Blessing developing his own darkness would be completely understandable. Maybe these days it can only come out in petty shouting matches and overbearing familial control, but maybe he used to release his anger by killing. After all, the Ripper has been dormant for 5 years by now, but he could have taken a break for any number of reasons. If Blessing is the Ripper, maybe he stopped killing to look over his mother's condition after she was diagnosed with cancer. Maybe he was getting too old to keep up killing like he used to. Whatever the reason, Blessing has a lot of the right factors to be the Ripper. He already lived in New York City, he is an age-appropriate possibility, and he has a bit of a temper and a backstory you wouldn't wish on your worst enemy. Added all together, he looks like a pretty good suspect. The only real problem with this theory are those voicemails. Blessing Kamara has a very distinct accent, and the voice of the Ripper from the recorded phone calls doesn't seem to match it at all. If Blessing is the New York Ripper, he either has to use some sort of technology that allows him to alter his voice, or he has to have an accomplice who makes the calls for him, and that would be insane. There is, however, one potential suspect who has just the right accent, and a few other indicators that he may be the true culprit. Unless you were anticipating a recycling of the Dexter vs. Doak story arc, or a reworking of the plot of Original Sin, Detective Melvin Oliva is probably not who you believe to be the New York Ripper. It's too obvious at this point for the writers of Dexter to make a member of law enforcement the killer that their own team is looking for. Obvious, but not impossible. And plenty of people are already guessing that Oliva is the New York Ripper, and there are a few things that suggest he might be. If you forgot, Detective Oliva is the partner of Detective Claudette Wallace, an all-star detective with the NYPD working in homicide. She has a reputation for being very meticulous in her investigations and dedicated to solving her cases, and she is very good at it. Detective Oliva is a good detective too, but lacks her laser-sharp focus and attention to detail. He seems willing to close a case faster than her if all the pieces seem to fall into place, and he stops her from losing herself in any one case before she becomes obsessed with it, like she did with the New York Ripper investigation. While he seems harmless, friendly even, what is particularly suspicious about him is how casually he seems to take his job. There is no doubt that Detective Wallace can get too into her cases and could use a partner who is able to keep her grounded, but he is almost too eager to move on from a case. He discouraged Claudette from looking too deeply into the murder of Ryan Foster after they found his watch in her house. Despite the glaring inconsistencies she found in the case and other Lady Vengeance killings, he also quickly shot down Batista's ideas about interviewing Lady Vengeance after her arrest and scoffed at his theory that her death in jail was all too convenient. Batista's investigation into Dexter doesn't even impede his ability to do his job in any way, and he still didn't want him poking around for some reason. Kind of sounds like the actions of a person with inside knowledge or someone with a few skeletons of their own to hide. Not only that, but Oliva was all too happy to attend Prater's gala, even going so far as to point out how much money Prater donates to the force every year. Does he just like dressing up, or is he receiving his own personal payments from Prater and looking forward to rubbing elbows with him in public? Prater did say that he had people on the inside of law enforcement at every level. Is Oliva one of his inside men? If Oliva was the Ripper, it would make sense that he and Prater were working closely together. He could keep Leon safe with knowledge of the direction certain investigations were going, and Leon could supply Oliva with the money and connections to keep himself out of trouble, no matter what he got himself into. That would also explain why he wanted Claudette to move on from the Ripper case. He could frame it as if he was concerned for her job, when really he just wanted to make sure he didn't get caught. He has the perfect voice for the voicemails. Nothing too identifiable and very easily disguised. If he wanted to taunt the victims during his hiatus from killing, he would be able to do so no problem. And I'm sorry, but there is just something a bit off about Oliva. His confident grin and dark, judgmental eyes don't exactly scream innocence. He speaks so nonchalantly about cases even as unsettling as the New York Rippers. I get it, he's a seasoned, grizzled detective, but some have begun to wonder if this is because he is a killer who enjoys reliving his own crimes and is in no way disturbed by them because he did them himself. It could also be chalked up to professional detachment, but given how big the case was, how his own city was terrorized, and the fact that his own partner almost lost her job over it, one might expect less jokes about the murder weapon and more passion from him when going over the facts of the case. Why does he try so hard to downplay it? The main issues with this theory are the fact that he willingly pointed out the New York Ripper dossier to Claudette in the vault, when he could have pulled a Harry Morgan in that moment and tried concealing it or burying it with all the rest till he was safe in a place to extract it without being seen. Or maybe he showed it to her because he knew that nothing in the file would actually help her solve the case. The name on the front of the file looks fake and could just be an alias. I mean, whose last name is Frempt? What if the information inside the file is just as heavily redacted and he knew it? By handing his obsessive partner a useless file on a silver platter, Oliva is able to look like he's helping, when really he's just wasting her time and ensuring his continued freedom. The file even could have been a failsafe. The only other problem is that it would be a bit too predictable at this point in the Dexter franchise to use the whole "the killer is a member of law enforcement, hiding in plain sight" angle at this point. He may seem like a good possible suspect, but everything that points to him being the Ripper is speculative at best and completely circumstantial. We would definitely need more information about Oliva before anyone can say he's the Ripper with real confidence, and the upcoming season is sure to offer more backstory for him. But in the meantime, it is just a fun theory that, even if a bit overdone, would definitely result in an exciting second season if true. Watching him try to outsmart his own partner and stay a step ahead of Dexter would be the ultimate showdown. Harrison's new girlfriend, Gigi Jones, is another unlikely suspect, but it hasn't stopped fans from guessing that she could be the Ripper. Let's just start out by saying that she is almost definitely too young to be the Ripper if she has been honest about her age. It would be nearly impossible for someone her age to kill 22 people and take a 5-year break. She's even younger than Cody. How she would have pulled all of that off would be a feat for the writers to explain. She could get help from Prater, but that still wouldn't make the age thing add up. There's also the problem of the voice in the phone call. She would have the same problems as Blessing. How could she possibly disguise her feminine voice in the messages without an accomplice or some sort of voice modulator? It's just all a bit too nonsensical if you ask me, but there are a couple of reasons people are suspicious of her. The first is her obsession with law enforcement. Lots of killers are very interested in becoming a member of law enforcement, whether that be to control investigations from the inside, to throw suspicion off of themselves, or just to have some official claim to power over others. For someone who seems as free-spirited and anti-establishment as Gigi, being a cop just seems like an odd first choice for a career. And yet she is devastated when she finds out that that is no longer an option for her. Which brings us to the second reason fans are pointing to her as the Ripper. It was her arm injury that took her out of the running to become a police officer. But was she honest about how she got it? She claims it was a motorcycle injury that caused the injury. She told Harrison she was thrown off of her bike. She was thrown from a speeding motorcycle, and yet somehow the only part of her body that was seriously injured was her arm. There isn't so much as another scrape, cut, or bruise anywhere on her. That seems highly unlikely for a motorcycle accident, don't you think? Why would she lie about the way she hurt herself if it didn't happen while she was doing something nefarious? And an arm injury would make sense for someone who is running around slinging something as large and dangerous as a manhole cover remover. One false move and the Ripper could end up with a bad injury like that. She also claimed she got it recently, but who knows how long her arm has been hurt. She could have been wearing that brace for months or years. She could have explained the injury away with another story to other people. Harrison just got there, so she knows he wouldn't know if she was lying or not. And of course, an arm injury that serious would explain why the Ripper was no longer active. But again, this entire theory relies on the idea that Gigi is lying about her age, and there is nothing to indicate that she has been. Not yet, at least. This idea is even less plausible than the Cody theory, but it's still been gaining traction in fan circles. Season 2 will be a wild ride if it turns out that any of these people are the New York Ripper, but if it's Gigi, that would be bordering on impossible. Finally, a lot of people believe that none of the characters we've met so far are the real New York Ripper. So little is known about the killer so far that it really could be almost anyone at this point, so why make it something as predictable as Aliva or as outlandish as Cody? Why not let Gigi and Blessing be normal people in Dexter and Harrison's lives who help keep them considerate and careful by having people in their lives that they care about? The stakes are raised for the Morgans. They have to be more thoughtful in the way they go about handling their business to keep these people safe. Like when Harrison fought the urge to stab Elsa's landlord in the eye because he knew how that could complicate her and her son's lives, including his own. Having someone that he cares about like Gigi around makes her a liability, but also pressures Harrison to be a better person with a less explosive temper. Same with Blessing. He is a kind friend and neighbor to Dexter. As Dexter is selling out to dump Leon's body at the end of season 1, he says that he needs people like Blessing and his family in his life. If that's true, one can only hope that Blessing doesn't end up being the New York Ripper. It's being theorized that the name on the New York Ripper file is an alias or an anagram, something that when rearranged spells out a hidden message. Don Frampt can be arranged to spell "don't farm." Did the Ripper have some sort of deal with Prater not to be recruited for his little club? The front of everyone else's files had dates and information about their status like dead, active, inactive, etc. But the Ripper's file has none of that. It does have the abbreviation NTD on it a few times. People are guessing that it stands for not to disclose or name to be determined or something like that. Prater may or may not have known the true identity of the Ripper, but until we see what's really in that file, this will all be a wild guessing game. Someone as prolific but secretive as the New York Ripper would benefit from having a pretty bare bones file if he had to have one at all. And then there is the fact that the Ripper may not even be aware of the file, just like Charlie did know about hers. It's just too early to rule anyone out. And it would be so fun to see a new character enter as the Ripper, a fresh face with a unique motive, someone who is possibly on the ropes after learning that the case has been reopened and Leon Prater has mysteriously disappeared. The idea that the Ripper is not someone we've seen yet is perhaps the most fun way for things to play out, as the suspense builds in a natural way. Some people are even suggesting that the Ripper may be more than one person, but a group of people collaborating to fulfill their collective dark urges. But we've already seen that with the Gemini Killers, and to be honest, no matter who the Ripper is, we know that Dexter Resurrection Season 2 is going to have us all on the edge of our seats and waiting impatiently for Season 3. Fingers crossed the storyline of the New York Ripper doesn't disappoint. But what are you thinking? Do any of these theories make sense to you? Is Cody really coming back for a resurrection of his own in the upcoming season? Are there any good theories we forgot? Keep the guessing going in the comments below. Slash that subscribe button before you go. And if you like this breakdown, check out our video covering everything we know about Dexter Resurrection Season 2 so far. Remember to like and share, and as always, thanks for watching.